Hi, I'm Chris Haimbach. I'm head of sales, commercial strategy, and operations for Bayer Consumer Healthcare.
Thank you very much, Chris. Really appreciate you having me coming on. Well, let's talk about you as a decision maker. So obviously you're in an important position at Bayer, and Bayer has been going through the new normal, as has everyone. So what problems, expected and unexpected, are you encountering in the decisions that you're making as you're transitioning to the new normal?
Yeah, a couple areas I would say. One is how to deal with ambiguity. There's so much that is not known with the new normal. And even when we think we know it, it seems to change day by day. And so how do you plan for something when you're not clear on what that something is? We've been trying to really drive flexibility and individual decision making where it makes sense, but also having guidelines and direction where it makes sense for the broader group. It's always a tough balance between, call it, the needs of the individual and the power of a team. COVID has redefined the ability to work from home or anywhere else for that matter.
Sure.
Working from the beach is my preference, by the way. And so,
that's nice.
Yeah, the ability to flex is going to be a mandate moving forward for all companies and employees around the world. However, oftentimes we think about ourselves first, at least I do. And while we want to provide individual flexibility, you still want to provide a team culture. And I do believe that bringing organizations together as a team, you can get more done than obviously one-on-one. And so how do you kind of prioritize the greater good and not but also value the individual? And I think companies that can do that are the ones that are going to win. And then creating an office environment that inspires our people to come to work or come to the office versus feeling like they have to come to the office. And more importantly, when they leave the office, they're inspired. Here at Bayer, we're not going to be there every day. And so when we go in the office, I don't want to do things the way I've always done them.
Sure.
We've got to make the team piece come together even more so versus just sitting in a room and doing work. We've demonstrated we can do that anywhere. It doesn't have to be a quote unquote formal office. So how do we bring the team together to create a culture of winning as one team, an inspiration that lasts the days that I'm not in the office or not seeing my teammates?
I think that's really important. So let's go back to the couple of points that you raised about ambiguity, team, individual, and safety. And so those are all important. So let's dive a little bit deeper into ambiguity. Do you think that there's more ambiguity coming forward for Bayer, for you, for your team, or less ambiguity as you're looking to the future?
It's a great question. My hope is less, but I believe it's probably more. What we've seen with COVID, with the consumer at least, is it sped up decision making and changes that were already occurring by, call it, 5 years or so. And as I've been around, it seems like every year things get a little bit more ambiguous. And change seems to happen faster in every industry and every part of life, probably. And so while maybe the pace of the last year and a half may not hold up, I think change and ambiguity is going to continue to be more the norm moving forward than it has in the past.
And how do you think that will impact Bayer's planning? I know a year and a half ago when we started talking about Bayer, you were talking about how Bayer was working on future-proofing. And as you know, that's my area of expertise. So we started having those conversations. Now, how do you figure that will impact Bayer's strategy, whether around future-proofing or other areas going forward, this greater amount of ambiguity and quicker pace of change?
Yeah, I love that question. That's a really thoughtful one. What we've tried to design our culture is flexibility and adaptiveness to change. I've been at different companies and different organizations, and some people don't like change, if you will. But if you don't like change, that's one thing, but you got to get used to it. And we've seen a lot of change in our last, 5 or so years, a lot of change. And those that are willing to kind of make change and adopt to change quickly and take advantage of the changing market. As an example, you go back 3-4 years ago, Instacart was around. But it's now become much more of a household name.
Yeah.
Uber used to be only about getting a ride to or from. Now it's about getting dinner delivered. Sure. These companies have figured out ways to take change and adapt quickly and try different things. There's a lot of things that haven't worked that people have tried. It's this spirit of it's safe to try, and to adopt and move on quickly when thing doesn't work, take the good parts and reapply it. So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, so that's good. So you're talking about broadly and your company. Now let's dive deeper into your team and what you're doing. So just grounding that out so that the listeners, viewers can see what it means to be a decision maker kind of in the midst of it all. What kind of things are you doing? Give us some examples. So to the extent that you can, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Tuesday we spent 6 hours, my lead team together, and we actually spent time learning more about each other. One of the things I find is speed is enabled by trust. And trust is a tough word, right? Because if I say I don't trust you versus I do trust you, it tends to be binary, right?
Yes.
Trust is actually a continuum. And the more that we get to know each other as who we are and how we're built, and start to uncover biases, unconscious biases, and background, I believe every person is kind of a conglomeration of experiences that they've been through, and obviously genetics too. But as you start to understand where people came from, you can better predict and understand where they're going to go. And I think by investing, as I said, we spent 5 hours. We did, it's actually right in front of me, ironically. We call it the lifeline, and the y-axis is about happiness. The x-axis is about time. And you'll see, we oftentimes talk about the highs, but rarely do we talk about the lows. And so anyway, I think human nature, when you think back, there are things that impacted your life that you maybe haven't thought about. And the reason I say all this is I want my team to be able to move at the speed of lightning, and the best team have the most trust and understanding of each other. If you think about the best teams, let's use a sport. Wayne Gretzky famously said, skate to where the puck's headed, not where it's at, right?
Yes.
You understand your teammates, you know where they're sending the puck. And the defense may not know, right? They're not going to know where that is. And so the more time we spend with each other, understanding kind of our human nature and what makes us tick and what motivates us and how we best operate together, that brings transparency. And when you have the trust, you can now start to communicate versus couching it in what ifs or maybe not being direct. And that directness and that investment in each other, I think, is going to help our flexibility and agility, because we'll be able to better understand why we work together, what makes us tick, and how we motivate each other.
Okay, excellent. And that goes to the team question that you're talking about. Thank you. So that's a really clear example, illustration of what you're doing at your ground level. Now let's talk a little bit about that safety question coming into the office. Just before we started recording, you were sharing an episode that caused you to question safety in this. If you're comfortable sharing that episode, would you share the episode with the listeners and to the extent that you can? And so help us understand how that illustrates the challenges of safety going to the office and all of these issues.
Yeah, so we're a healthcare company, right? And we need to be upholding the best practices, I believe, in the world. And as an example, we haven't been back to the office since COVID hit. We've adopted this new way of approach, and it's really different. And in my job, I have to meet with customers, and fortunately, we have very strong protocols that we have to adhere to, and we have great partners and our customers who also have a lot of these rules and regulations. Anyway, we had a situation where we, for the first time in 18 months, met with a customer and had a meeting. And unfortunately, someone got COVID either before or after that meeting. We found out afterwards. And thank goodness we all followed the protocols. And so no one got hurt. It didn't spread. But we have a responsibility to our organization and to our people that we don't put them in harm's way. And so we're very cautious in how we approach. We spend a lot of time talking to the government, understanding the CDC, and obviously we have a pharma division as well. Yes, so understanding the implications that this can have. We've been on the safer side of really trying to make sure that we don't put our employees in harm's way, and fortunately, it's worked so far.
That's excellent. So we're talking about safety, we're talking about employees, the pharma industry now. As I'm sure you know, the pharma industry before COVID had a pretty low reputation. It was one of the least popular industries at least in the US. I think it's literally the lowest reputation of any private industry. How do you think COVID is going to change the reputation of pharma, Bayer in particular? So help me understand that. you think it will.
Yeah. I don't know if I can speak to Bayer so much because I don't have that data, but I would say as at least an individual,
Yeah.
I think we've shown the power of a pharmaceutical industry that can take one of the world's potentially biggest tragedies. And remember the day my wife mentioned that, they may shut down cities or country or, states or countries. I said, there's no way. But obviously we had to, right? I mean, if you think I was so naive coming into this. And it is so impactful what pharmaceutical companies have done in the last 18 months. We have such intelligent people at Bayer and other pharmaceutical companies that really care. And they went into this industry to care for others. Our mantra is health for all, hunger for none. And the health for all is something we really believe in. And I think a lot of pharma companies do as well. And so to your point, there's oftentimes lights shown on other parts of some of the bad behavior companies, if you will, in this industry. Yeah. I'm hoping that this COVID situation shines the light on all those people that have gone into this industry to make a difference in people's lives. And they've all risen to the occasion, and obviously frontline workers as well, and found a solution in record time where they've worked together to share across industry. It's really been powerful and impactful. And I hope, and I do believe that culture will see this as a win for mankind, but also probably for the power of pharma when we work together.
Yes, I definitely think so. I definitely think it will improve the reputation, and it's really important to do that, to seeing the potential and the value of the pharma industry. So let's talk a little bit more about the passion of the people and how they solve problems. Let's talk a little bit more about the principles and problem solving that you do in your everyday work at Bayer and that other folks at Bayer do. Tell me a little bit more about problem solving, how you approach that and how you think about that.
Yeah, the number one way that I found, it doesn't come naturally to me, the best salespeople are the best listeners because you can understand the individual's needs. And, in this situation, for example, I was talking about the difficulty of individual versus team. Listening to employees to understand their needs is probably our top opportunity. Because so often people in leadership, including myself, I believe I am the average person. Reality is that's not always the case. And so instead of jumping to conclusions or assuming I know, it's taking the time to pause and listen to the different needs of people. Oftentimes you find commonalities across employees, but sometimes you find differences. And examples, everybody wants to feel valued at work. Everyone wants to feel heard. Those are things that we can accomplish by better listening. Yeah. And as always, when you get groups of people providing different thoughts, the best solutions always come. And so as we have some really difficult problems, right? All of us do. When you can work together and listen across orgs, it's amazing. You'll meet with different folks, but you'll find sometimes they have common thoughts. When you hear it multiple places, you realize it's probably a common solution. The flip side, you'll hear other opportunities that you never thought of, and it helps you get in front of them.
So could you give us some examples of a solution that you had, unexpected opportunity, some unexpected solutions, just so folks can understand at the ground level how that worked, to the extent that you can, of course?
Yeah, this working through Teams or Zoom has been I don't know, it was painful in the beginning and it was tiring, right? You and I talked previously about Zoom fatigue.
Definitely.
And I have found we have what we use Microsoft Teams, but it works for Zoom the same way.
Sure.
There are people that adopt much quicker. And oftentimes they're in the younger part of the organization. And we have started a reverse mentorship program to teach everybody else, the lag, if you will, how to better utilize Teams. What are tricks to make it more effective? And then we've also, by listening to people, we've heard I'm always surprised when I get up at 6 o'clock or whatever after meeting all day, how exhausted I am. Yeah. It's like I didn't do anything but sit on my bottom all day and talk to people. But as I've listened to people, it's like they feel like they're on a stage. And if you've ever performed in front of people, it's exhausting because you feel like you have to perform, you have to be at your best. And so that's another one that's come up of like, all right, how do we hearing commonalities. So everyone's tired, everyone's suffering from fatigue, even though they're not physically doing as much as maybe they used to. And so like my desk, one of the things I got from somebody, you'll see like I spent half my day standing. And so it's that quick and easy. And it's so nice to be able to like do that. And I got this from Amazon for $100, and it, you know, but it knowing that we live kind of in an Instagram culture, right? Where you see all the good things that people in their life they show. But I think this has given us an opportunity, as your home has become work even more so, to peer into people's lives. And if you're vulnerable and you listen, you'll find lots of areas that you can even get better. And this is one where it's like, we provided flexible hours. So a lot of, a woman reached out to me who's got 2 kids, and she's a mom, and her kids were at homeschooling. I mean, you know, talk about difficulty, and she now does a lot of her work at night versus 8 to 5 or whatever the normal hours were. Those are the things that have come out of listening to employees to better understand how we can meet their needs where they're at.
So it sounds like those reverse mentoring, I love that idea, and flexible hours, and just generally listening to employees, understanding them, and being flexible with them. That's really important. And so it sounds like there are some changes in mindset that you have to adopt in this new normal. Tell us a little bit more about these shifts in mindset, whether it's older folks who have to listen to younger folks, which is not usual, and other changes in mindset, like, well, Zoom fatigue is a real issue for a number of reasons, like we talked about.
Yeah, so we oftentimes talk about risks in terms of business, but we don't necessarily talk about risks in terms of behavior change. And so I found we've had to be more open to trying new behaviors, more flexible at taking calculated risks, and understanding that the first time we try, it probably won't go right. But how do we make progress out of that and understand perfection's not going to happen, but take from that and learn and adopt. Learning from others, you know, again, as I talked about, levels really, in my mind, never mattered, but in some companies, I understand the cultural they do. But when you're sitting to someone and their kid walks in or their dog walks in, or like, you know, name that, it humanizes people. And I think actually this Zoom team thing and working from home has somewhat leveled the playing field. And I think people are more open to learning from others, no matter what their level is. Others in our industry, but also others outside. Other, you know, part of the reason you and I have talked, to understand what the best in class is doing, because you know, best in class aren't necessarily in our same industry. And then realize that the solution today may not be right for today, or may not be right tomorrow. And things are changing, as you and I talked about earlier, so rapidly that we have to be willing to adjust and understand that didn't work today. Let's try it again in 3 months, because maybe something else will work.
So it sounds like your mindset has had to become more adaptable, and listening to people who may not have had the authority or the voice. Can you give us some examples of some positive outcomes from that?
Yeah, so I would tell you almost every piece of our culture that's shifted. And I go back to a year and a half ago, we left the office and literally thought we'd be gone for at most 2 weeks, probably 2 days. And now it's been a year and a half and we haven't been in the office. And, you know, and you and I talked this too, we were doing happy hours in the beginning, things like that. But I screwed up. I was doing one-on-ones with all my direct reports, but one of the things I learned, someone was leaving the company, I connected with her, and I learned so much about what she was going through, and she had such good ideas that were unfiltered. And so now I'm meeting with every person in my organization for one-on-one, not in 1 week. I'm spreading out over a bit of time because it's a pretty big org. But in those situations, I'm trying to do a lot more listening than speaking.
Great.
Understand what opportunities are. And one of them, for example, we've pivoted our town hall. We have a town hall once a month. And it used to be really about the business. And now we've added a lot more personal stuff, I would say, or things about the organization of the culture. And then I also have people, it used to be quote unquote, the higher level people speaking. And we've really done a change in terms of filtering to get different people from the organization talking and getting their thoughts and showing their leadership. Because again, and sometimes in business, experience does help in certain areas, but we're all at the same level in some cases of working from home and working in this type of environment. And there are people that are surging to the front in terms of their flexibility or ways of working that we're trying to give also pulpits to teach people like myself how to be better.
It sounds like those so the kind of concrete examples, the ones which is definitely a best practice, and I talk about that in my book, Returning to the Office and Leading Hybrid and Remote Teams, benchmarking to best practices for competitive advantage. Definitely want to be doing that. And also sounds like the town halls have been really helpful. Cool. Let me circle back to something that you and I talked about earlier, the future proofing. So what steps you were doing future proofing a year and a half ago? What are you doing now to avoid those dangerous threats and seize those golden opportunities, which is what future proofing is all about?
Yeah, so I think part of it is trying to embed in our culture. We've identified really 3 areas that we're going after. And this has accelerated with COVID, and I think needs to accelerate even post-COVID. So you and I have talked today even about flexibility, right? And oftentimes people think flexibility is working from home versus working from the office. But reality is flexibility is about how to adapt, change different situations. And as we also talked about, trying to look forward, I think there's more ambiguity coming than not. So if you want a future proof, I actually think we say tomorrow the sky's gonna be blue. What if it's orange?
Yeah.
Right. So it's not about planning for blue, it's planning for the ability to be flexible if it's orange. What does that entail? The second one is inclusion. So there is so many different backgrounds of folks. And as I said, I think it's even come more to light as we've gotten closer to people personally because we're in their homes with our cameras. And so making people understand who they are and that it's okay to bring their full self to work. And we talk a lot about that. And I think sometimes it's easy to fall to full self is all the good things. And reality is, we all have opportunity areas and things that we don't post on Instagram or whatnot. And we need to be valued for who we are and bring those different points of view to light. And so it's really about inclusion. And the third one is performance. In all this stuff, we still have a business to run and organizations to lead. And so performance isn't just business. It's how to get the best out of your organization, how to have the best team. And in business, it's about the numbers. So to your point, a few months after COVID, we stepped back and started designing our organization to meet the new needs of consumers, customers, and employees. And these three things really popped out. And originally we were looking at 5 years out, but we quickly realized the speed of change. 5 years was kind of now. And so we've been trying to speed information flow so that we can better make decisions. And then I love this concept, team of teams. The gist of it is basically agile teams and team of teams there's a lot of similarities. What's common is getting information flow to those points where decisions can be made the quickest. So we've made a lot of investment in AI and information stacks, et cetera, to get information to the points that decisions are best made versus losing time, as we talked about, like bringing the information back to a centralized leadership decision-making. If things are happening quickly, you lose the agility and the flexibility. And so we're trying to empower our employees to lead change versus it just being a centralized choice. And by investing in data analytics, but also in the capabilities of our people. And so good and bad, there's pros and cons to this. If you provide more opportunity to invest in capabilities and make it more of instead of a push, make it a pull, people can find, because we have flexibility. There are days that my kids aren't home now, right? They were home last year, they were sitting here and I didn't have as much time. But we've set aside Fridays, for example. Every other Friday is a learning day. And we cancel all meetings. And the idea is to go invest in yourself. Again, if I feel confident in my people out in the field, in particular the salespeople calling on customers, if I can get them all the right information and I can get them the capabilities, now instead of one person making a decision, I've got hundreds of people making decisions. That's going to be a much better organization. And honestly, they're much closer to the customer and the information. So they're going to make better decisions than I would anyway.
So it sounds like there are 4 key themes: flexibility, inclusion, performance, and decentralization of authority, kind of pushing that authority down. Those are the 4 key themes that you and Bayer more broadly are looking at improving, addressing to future-proof.
Absolutely.
All right, great. Are there any other questions that I should have asked? Anything else you would like to share with our audience?
I'll tell you what I'm saying today versus if we talk 6 months. I don't think those 4 things will change. but I'm sure the how will change. So again, our number one is really investing in people and enabling them in those 4 areas, as you mentioned. And there are days that we don't do it, I'm sure, right? Like any sort of habit, it takes muscle memory. And some cases we've been doing it for years. In some cases it's relatively new, and we'll learn along the way. But going back to your very first question about adaptability, and there's stuff that's going to happen we can't expect. But I believe in these 4 areas that if we really demonstrate that and deeply embed it in our culture, we're going to have a better organization because of it.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Chris. Really appreciate you sharing this information with our audience.
Thank you for the time and the opportunity and your partnership.